The emergency lights flashed red throughout the council chamber. Kalara stood in the center of the massive room, her blue hands shaking as she held the data tablet. Around her, representatives from dozens of alien species whispered to each other in worried tones. Some had 4 arms, others had scales or fur, but all of them wore the same expression of fear. The hologram behind Kalara showed a planet called Talos 4. It was a beautiful world with green oceans and golden continents. 4 billion people lived there. Farmers, teachers, children, families, all of them were about to die. Kalara's voice cracked as she spoke. The Valorax Empire was coming. 16 warships, each one the size of a small city. They would arrive at Talos 4 in 72 hours. The planet had no weapons, no military, no way to defend itself. The Valorax had promised to destroy everything as a warning to other worlds. The Council had tried everything. They sent diplomats. They offered money, resources, territory. The Valorax refused every offer. They wanted war. They wanted conquest. In 6 months, they had already taken 14 Council worlds. Millions were dead or enslaved. The Council's peaceful ships were no match for Valorax battlecruisers. A tall representative with gray skin stood up. He spoke in a deep voice through his translator. The nearest Council fleet was 14 days away. Too far, too slow. Talos 4 would be ashes before help arrived. His words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kalara felt tears running down her face. In all her years as a diplomat, she had never felt so helpless. The Galactic Council had existed for thousands of years. They had built a civilization based on peace and cooperation. War was something primitive species did, something they had left behind long ago, now that peaceful civilization was being torn apart, and they had no way to stop it. In the back row of the chamber, Jake Morrison sat quietly. He was a human, one of only 3 in the entire building. His gray suit looked plain compared to the colorful robes and ceremonial armor worn by other ambassadors. At 42 years old, Jake had gray hair at his temples and lines around his eyes. He sat with his back straight, hands folded on the desk in front of him. Next to him, Sophie Grant leaned close and whispered. She was his assistant, a young woman with sharp eyes and a military bearing. She told him that Earth Command had been watching the situation. They had been tracking the Valorax movements for weeks. The 5th Fleet was ready to launch. Jake nodded slowly. He had been expecting this moment. Dreading it, really. When Earth joined the Galactic Council 20 years ago, they had hoped to leave their violent past behind. Humanity had fought wars for thousands of years. They were tired of killing. They wanted to explore, to learn, to be part of something bigger than themselves. But Jake had served in the Navy for 20 years before becoming a diplomat. He knew the truth. Peace only lasted when someone was strong enough to protect it. The Council had forgotten that lesson if they ever knew it at all. He pressed the button on his desk. A soft chime sounded, requesting permission to speak. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. The room fell silent. Most Council members barely noticed the human delegation. Earth was young, primitive, unremarkable. They had only been in space for 200 years. What could they possibly contribute? Jake stood up. His voice was calm and steady as he spoke. He told them that Earth had been monitoring the situation. Humanity understood the danger. They would not stand by while 4 billion innocent people died. The 5th Fleet would deploy immediately. They would reach Talos 4 in 60 hours. The chamber erupted in noise. Representatives shouted questions. How was this possible? Human ships were fast, yes, but not that fast. And even if they arrived in time, what could they do? The Valorax had 16 warships. The human fleet was small, designed only for defending Earth itself. This was suicide. A blue-skinned representative with long robes stood up. His voice was sharp with disbelief. He demanded to know what Jake was thinking. Did humans not understand the danger? The Valorax had crushed every force sent against them. They had weapons that could crack planets. They showed no mercy. Sending a small fleet would only result in more deaths. Jake waited for the noise to die down. Then he spoke again, his voice carrying across the chamber. He told them that humanity appreciated their concern. But Earth had made a promise when they joined the Council. They swore to protect member worlds. Talos 4 was a member world. Therefore, Earth would protect it. The session ended in chaos. Representatives argued with each other, their translators creating a wall of overlapping voices. Some thought the humans were brave. Others thought they were fools. None of them truly understood what was about to happen. Kalara found Jake in the corridor outside the chamber. She approached him with worry written across her face. Her people, the Thessians, had been in space for 3,000 years. They had seen empires rise and fall. She knew war, even if her species had abandoned it long ago. She asked Jake what he was doing. She had read the reports on human military capability. Earth had ships, yes. Weapons, yes. But nothing that could stand against the Velorax. Why throw away human lives in a battle that could not be won? Jake looked at her with tired eyes. He had expected this question. He told her that she was right. By every calculation, by every tactical analysis, humanity should lose this fight. The Velorax had bigger ships, more ships, better weapons. On paper, it was not even close. But war was not fought on paper. It was fought by people who had trained their entire lives for moments like this. Humanity had spent 10,000 years learning how to kill each other. They had refined warfare into a science. Every tactic, every strategy, every weapon system was designed with one goal in mind. To win, Kalara did not understand. She asked what made humans so different. Why would soldiers from a death world be any better than trained Velorax warriors? Jake's expression hardened. He explained that Earth was not like other worlds. The gravity was higher. The atmosphere was thicker. Predators hunted humans from the moment they climbed down from the trees. Disease, starvation, natural disasters. Everything on Earth tried to kill them. Humans survived by being adaptable, aggressive, and absolutely refusing to give up. When humans started fighting each other, those same traits made them terrifying. They studied their failures. They honored their dead. They built monuments to battles lost so they would never make the same mistakes again. Every human military academy taught the lessons learned from thousands of years of warfare. The council species had evolved on peaceful worlds. They achieved space travel through cooperation and shared knowledge. War was rare, almost unthinkable. Their military ships were ceremonial. Their soldiers were more like police officers than warriors. Humans were different. Every human warship was built to kill. Every human soldier trained to win. They did not celebrate war. They did not want it. But when war came, they were ready. Kalara stood silent for a long moment. She had always thought of humans as friendly, perhaps a bit rough around the edges, but ultimately harmless. Now she was beginning to understand. Earth had sent diplomats to the council, scientists, artists, teachers. They had shown their best side. But beneath that friendly surface was something the galaxy had not seen in a very long time. Predators. Jake returned to his quarters that evening. The room was small and simple, decorated with pictures of Earth. Blue oceans, green forests, snow-capped mountains. It looked so peaceful. Hard to believe that world had produced a species capable of such violence. He opened a secure communication channel to Earth. The face of Admiral Daniel Cross appeared on the screen. The Admiral was an older man with gray hair and hard eyes. He had fought in the last major human conflict, the Mars Rebellion, 30 years ago. He understood what was being asked of him. Jake gave the authorization code. The Fifth Fleet was cleared to launch. Rules of engagement were simple. Protect Telos 4. Destroy any Velorax forces that threatened the planet. Show no mercy to those who showed none. Admiral Cross acknowledged the orders. He told Jake that the fleet would launch within the hour. They would jump to maximum speed and arrive with 12 hours to spare. The Velorax would not know what hit them. The transmission ended. Jake sat in the darkness of his quarters staring at the pictures of Earth. He had hoped this day would never come. He had hoped humanity could leave their violent nature behind, could become something better. But the galaxy needed warriors. And humanity, whether they wanted to be or not, were the best warriors the universe had ever produced. In orbit around Earth's moon, the Fifth Fleet powered up their engines. 38 warships, gray and unmarked, hanging in the void like silent judges. They had been built for this purpose, trained for this purpose, waiting for this purpose. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the carrier Valiant. Around him, his crew worked with quiet efficiency. They checked weapon systems, verified targeting data, reviewed tactical plans. They were scared. They were excited. They were ready. The Admiral gave the order. The fleet jumped into hyperspace, leaving Earth behind. They were going to war, not because they wanted to, not because they enjoyed it, but because someone had to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them. And if the galaxy had forgotten what that meant, humanity was about to remind them. The Fifth Fleet hung in space above Earth's moon like a wall of gray steel. Admiral Daniel Cross stood on the bridge of the carrier Valiant, watching his tactical display. Each ship showed green across all systems. Weapons armed, reactors at full power. Marines loaded and ready. They were prepared for war. Cross was 58 years old. His hair had gone completely gray years ago. Deep lines marked his face, carved there by decades of difficult decisions. He had commanded ships in the Mars. Rebellion had seen friends die, had given orders that cost lives. Every scar on his soul reminded him that war was not glorious. It was necessary. Captain Lisa Chen approached with the final status reports. All 38 ships were ready to jump. The crew were at battle stations. Everything was green. Chen was younger than Cross, but she had served under him for 10 years. She knew how he thought, could anticipate his orders before he gave them. That trust made them an effective team. Cross opened the fleet-wide channel. His voice was calm and measured as he addressed every ship. He told them they were about to do what humanity had always done: stand between innocent people and those who wanted to hurt them. The people of Telos 4 did not know Earth. They did not know humanity's history, but they were about to learn that when you threatened 4 billion lives, you answered to a species that had been fighting wars since before fire. He gave the order. The fleet jumped. Space twisted around them. The laws of physics bent as the jump drives tore holes through reality itself. It was not comfortable. Every crew member felt their stomach drop as the universe folded. Then, as quickly as it started, it ended. They were in hyperspace, traveling faster than light toward Telos 4. On Harmony Prime, the Council station orbiting a neutral world, Kalara watched the long-range sensors. The human fleet had disappeared from normal space, moving faster than Council ships could match. The calculations showed they would arrive 12 hours early. She did not understand how that was possible. Jake Morrison sat beside her in the observation gallery. Sophie Grant stood behind them, arms crossed. The three of them stared at the tactical display in silence. 16 red markers showed Velorax warships advancing on Telos 4. 38 blue markers showed the human fleet racing to intercept. Kalara finally spoke. She asked the question that had been bothering her since the council session. The Fifth Fleet was not large. The Velorax had bigger ships, more weapons, better shields. By every measurement, this should be a massacre. What made Jake think humanity could win? Jake pulled up historical data on his tablet. He showed her battles from human history. The Battle of Mars, where two fleets fought for 3 days in the orbit of the Red Planet. The Titan Blockade, where human ships used the moon's rings as cover to ambush enemy forces. The Jupiter Campaign, where Marines boarded enemy vessels and fought room by room in zero gravity. The casualty numbers made Kalara feel sick. Thousands dead in single battles. Entire ships destroyed in minutes. Cities on Mars bombed from orbit. This was not war as the Council understood it. This was industrial-scale killing. Jake explained that humans did not fight the way the Council expected. They did not build ceremonial fleets or rely on superior numbers. Every human warship was designed with one purpose: kill the enemy before the enemy kills you. Their weapons were not for show. Their armor was not decorative. And their crews trained every single day for combat. Sophie added more information. She told Kalara about human military academies. Young people spent 4 years learning tactics, strategy, weapon systems, ship operations. Then they spent years more in practical training. Simulations, war games, exercises. By the time a human officer took command, they had fought hundreds of battles in simulation. They knew every trick, every maneuver, every counter-strategy. Kalara asked the question that frightened every council member. If humans were this dangerous, why did the council accept them as members? Jake's answer was simple: because humanity promised they would never use these capabilities unless absolutely necessary. They had kept that promise for 20 years. They joined the council to be part of something peaceful, something better than their violent past. But now the promise had conditions. If council members were threatened, Earth would respond. And the galaxy was about to see what that meant. Aboard the Valiant, Life continued with military precision. In the hangar bays, pilots checked their fighters. The Raptors were small, fast ships designed for space combat. Each one carried plasma cannons and guided missiles. The pilots called them birds, treating the machines like living things. Commander Alex Turner walked between the fighters talking to his squadron leaders. The 7th Fighter Wing consisted of 72 pilots divided into 6 squadrons. Turner had flown combat missions in the Mars Rebellion. He was calm, confident, and absolutely certain of victory. Not because he was arrogant, but because he trusted his training and his people. He told his pilots the mission was simple: establish space superiority, keep enemy fighters away from the fleet, protect the Valiant at all costs. The carrier was their home, their base, their lifeline. If it went down, they all went down. But Turner had no intention of letting that happen. In the Marine barracks, Major Paul Henderson briefed his soldiers. 400 men and women in powered armor stood in neat rows, listening. The armor made them look like robots, gray and angular, bristling with weapons. But inside each suit was a human being, scared and excited and ready. Henderson was blunt with them. If the space battle went badly, they would board enemy ships. If it went well, they would liberate occupied worlds. Either way, they were going into hell. He did not sugarcoat it. Marines respected honesty. They trained for the worst and hoped for the best. Down in engineering, Rachel Kim monitored the reactor systems. The Valiant's fusion cores burned hotter than the sun. They provided power for everything: weapons, shields, life support, the jump drive. Kim's team had maintained these reactors through 3 deployments. They knew every pipe, every valve, every backup system. The reactors would not fail. She would not let them. Admiral Cross walked through the ship during the jump. He visited engineering, the hangar bays, the Marine barracks. He spoke with crew members, learned their names, asked about their families. Morale mattered. A crew that trusted their commander would follow him anywhere. A crew that feared their commander would hesitate at the wrong moment. Cross had learned this lesson 30 years ago on Mars. He had served under a captain who ruled through fear. When the fighting started, the crew froze. Half of them died because they were too scared to act. Cross swore he would never make that mistake. His crew loved him because he treated them like people, not tools. Far ahead in normal space, the Valorax fleet advanced on Telos 4. Aboard the flagship Dominion, Commander Thrak reviewed sensor data. Something had entered the system. An unknown fleet, moving fast. He pulled up the information. 38 ships, small compared to Valorax standards. The computer identified them as human vessels. Thrak searched his memory. Humans. The weak species from the death world. He had read reports about them. High gravity, aggressive behavior, but ultimately nothing special. They should have stayed out of this. Thrak was confident. The Valorax Empire had conquered 14 worlds in 6 months. No one had offered real resistance. Council ships fled or surrendered. Their soldiers begged for mercy. Every battle reinforced the lesson that the Valorax were superior. His tactical officer suggested caution. The human fleet was moving faster than expected. Their formation was unusual. Perhaps they should wait, gather more intelligence. Thrak dismissed the concern. 38 ships against 16 Valorax battle cruisers? The outcome was obvious. He ordered his fleet to intercept the humans. They would destroy these newcomers as a lesson to the rest of the Council. Resistance was pointless. The Valorax could not be stopped. His crew cheered at the order. They were warriors. They lived for battle. This would be easy. Thrak had fought against Council forces before. They maneuvered slowly, fired weapons from safe distances, retreated at the first sign of damage. They fought like they were afraid to die. Valorax warriors embraced death. It made them fearless, it made them strong. He assumed humans would fight the same way. Run, hide, beg. He had no idea he was about to face something the galaxy had not seen in thousands of years. A species that was not afraid to die. A species that was equally unafraid to kill. The Fifth Fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Telos system. Alarms sounded immediately. Sensors lit up with contact markers. 16 massive ships, exactly where intelligence predicted. The Velorax fleet was 4 million kilometers away and closing fast. Admiral Cross stood at his command station, hands behind his back. Around him, officers called out information: enemy positions, weapon status, shield strength. The bridge hummed with controlled tension. Everyone knew what was coming. Cross opened a channel to the Velorax fleet. His message was simple: withdraw immediately or face destruction. There was no response. The Velorax were charging weapons, preparing to attack. They had made their choice. Captain Chen looked at Cross. She asked if he wanted to wait, to give them one more chance to surrender. Cross shook his head. The Velorax had been given chances. They had been offered peace. They chose war. Now they would learn what war really meant. The first shots came from the human cruisers. Railguns fired solid metal slugs accelerated to incredible speeds. The projectiles crossed the distance in seconds, moving so fast they became invisible streaks of death. Commander Thrak barely had time to react. The first impacts hit 3 of his ships. The Velorax shields, designed to deflect energy beams, did nothing against solid metal traveling at a fraction of light speed. The slugs punched through shields like they were not there and tore into the hulls beneath. Explosions bloomed across the Velorax formation. One ship lost power completely, going dark and tumbling through space. Another vented atmosphere from massive holes in its side. A third had its engine section ripped away, leaving it crippled and helpless. Thrak shouted orders: return fire, close the distance. His ships tried to respond, but the humans were not where he expected them to be. The 38 human vessels had spread out in every direction, surrounding the Velorax fleet in a sphere. They circled like wolves around wounded prey. More railgun shots came from different angles. The human cruisers moved constantly, never staying in one place long enough to be targeted. They fired, relocated, fired again. Each shot was calculated by targeting computers and guided by artificial intelligence. Very few missed. Then the missiles launched. Human destroyers fired hundreds of guided weapons, small and fast. They came from every direction, twisting and turning to avoid point defense fire. The Velorax tried to shoot them down, but there were too many. Explosions rippled across Velorax hulls as missiles found their targets. On the Valiant's bridge, Admiral Cross watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Everything was going according to plan. The Velorax were reacting exactly as predicted. Aggressive, straightforward, predictable. Human doctrine was built around exploiting those weaknesses. Captain Chen reported that 5 Velorax ships were already crippled. 2 more were heavily damaged. The human fleet had not taken a single hit. Cross nodded but did not celebrate. The battle was far from over. Wounded animals were dangerous. Commander Turner launched from the Valiant with the 7th Fighter Wing. 72 Raptor fighters accelerated away from the carrier, spreading into combat formation. Their mission was simple: keep enemy fighters away from the fleet, protect the larger ships. The Velorax launched their own fighters. Hundreds of small craft poured from the battlecruisers like angry insects. They outnumbered the human fighters 10 to 1. Turner was not worried. Numbers meant nothing if you did not know how to use them. The 2 fighter groups met in the space between fleets. Chaos erupted. Velorax fighters attacked in straight lines, relying on speed and numbers. Human pilots moved, in 3 dimensions, using tactics developed over decades of training. Turner locked onto an enemy fighter. His targeting computer tracked its movement, predicted its path. He fired. The plasma bolt caught the Velorax craft dead center. It exploded in a flash of light and debris. His wingmate, Lieutenant Karen Brooks, called out 2 enemies on their tail. Turner pulled hard, the G-forces crushing him into his seat. Most species would have blacked out. Humans, evolved under higher gravity, could handle it. He looped back and fired again. Both enemy fighters became expanding clouds of wreckage. The pattern repeated across the battlefield. Human fighters moved with precision, communicated constantly, supported each other. Velorax fighters attacked individually, aggressive but uncoordinated. They died in droves. Within 20 minutes, the Velorax fighter screen was destroyed. Turner reformed his wing and prepared for the next phase. Close support strikes on enemy capital ships. On Harmony Prime, the Council watched in stunned silence. The tactical feed showed the battle in real time. What they saw was impossible. The humans were winning, not just winning, dominating. In 30 minutes of fighting, they had destroyed or crippled 8 Velorax ships and wiped out the enemy fighters. Not one human vessel had taken serious damage. Kalara sat frozen, unable to process what she was seeing. The Velorax had crushed every force sent against them. They had weapons that could level cities. They had never lost a battle. Until now. A Draxian representative stood up, his voice filled with shock. He said what everyone was thinking. This was not luck. This was not random. Every human move was coordinated. Every shot was calculated. They were executing a plan with surgical precision. Jake Morrison sat quietly, watching the battle. He took no pleasure in it. War was never something to celebrate. But he felt a grim satisfaction knowing that humanity's promise was being kept. 4 billion people on Telos 4 would live. That was worth fighting for. Sophie Grant stood beside him, her face serious. She understood what this meant for Earth's future. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. They could not. Fear and respect were two sides of the same coin. A Thessian elder asked the question no one wanted to voice. If humans could do this to the Velorax, what would happen? If they turned this power against the Council? Jake met the elder's gaze. He told them that Earth joined the Council to have allies, to be part of something larger than themselves. Humanity wanted peace. But if anyone threatened Earth or its friends, they would respond. The galaxy needed to understand that peaceful did not mean helpless. Aboard the Dominion, Commander Thrak faced the impossible. His fleet was being destroyed. 8 ships gone, 4 more crippled. The humans had not slowed down. They circled his remaining forces, striking from every angle, never giving him a chance to fight back effectively. He tried everything. He ordered his ships to concentrate fire on single targets. The humans scattered before they could be hit. He tried to close the distance for boarding actions. The humans maintained range with superior engines. He launched more fighters. They were shot down within minutes. Thrak had never felt fear in battle before. He had always been confident, certain of victory. The Velorax were warriors. They were bred for combat. They dominated every species they encountered. But these humans were different. They fought with cold efficiency, no emotion, no hesitation. Like machines designed only to kill. In desperation, Thrak ordered his remaining 4 ships to focus all firepower on the human carrier. If they could destroy it, maybe they could break the human formation. His ships turned, weapons glowing with charged energy. They unleashed everything at the Valiant. Admiral Cross saw the attack coming. He ordered evasive maneuvers. The massive carrier twisted with surprising speed. The point defense systems engaged, filling space with streams of metal that intercepted incoming fire. Some shots got through. The shields flared bright blue, absorbing the energy. Damage reports came in. Minor hull breaches on decks 7 and 12. No casualties. The Valiant was designed to take punishment. Her armor was thick. Her shields were powerful. A few lucky shots would not bring her down. Cross did not waste the opportunity. While the Velorax focused on the carrier, the human cruisers moved in close. At short range, their main batteries opened fire. The effect was devastating. One Velorax ship exploded completely. Its reactor breached. Another lost all power and began tumbling. A third broke apart, torn in half by sustained fire. Thrak realized with horror that he had lost. Only one of his ships was still combat capable. 15 battlecruisers destroyed or crippled. His crew was dead or dying. His empire's reputation was shattered. He had 2 choices: continue fighting and die, or surrender and live with the shame. Pride made his decision. He ordered his last ship to ram the human carrier. If he was going to die, he would take them with him. The Dominion's engines flared to full power. The massive ship accelerated toward the Valiant on a collision course. Admiral Cross saw it immediately. He did not panic. He gave orders calmly and clearly. Disable their engines. Do not destroy the ship. We are taking prisoners. The cruisers focused their fire on the Dominion's engine section. Precision shots calculated to cripple without killing. Within seconds, the Valorax flagship lost propulsion. It coasted forward on momentum alone, no longer a threat. Cross turned to Major Henderson. It was time for the Marines to earn their pay. They were going in. The Valiant moved alongside the crippled Dominion. Magnetic clamps locked the two ships together. Breaching charges were set. Henderson's Marines assembled at the airlock, weapons ready. They had trained for this. Boarding actions were dangerous, close-quarters combat in zero gravity, but Marines specialized in dangerous. The charges blew. A section of the Valorax hull tore away. Henderson led the first squad through the breach. His powered armor protected him from the vacuum. His helmet display showed enemy positions detected by sensors. He moved quickly, efficiently, his squad behind him. The Valorax crew tried to resist. They were strong, faster than humans, better adapted to low gravity, but they were not wearing armor. They did not have the training. They did not have the weapons. Henderson's squad cleared room after room, moving like a well-oiled machine. Within an hour, the Dominion was secured. The Valorax crew surrendered when they realized resistance was pointless. Henderson's Marines escorted them to holding areas, treating them firmly but not cruelly. They were prisoners now, not enemies. Commander Thrak knelt on the bridge of his flagship, hands bound. He had never felt such shame. Defeated by a species he thought was weak, captured by warriors who showed him mercy instead of killing him. He did not understand these humans. The council chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives from 73 species all talked at once. Some were relieved. Some were terrified. All were shocked. The humans had done what the entire council could not do in 6 months. They had defeated the Valorax in less than 3 hours. Kalara stood at the center, trying to restore order. Her voice cut through the noise. She acknowledged what everyone was thinking. Humanity had just demonstrated military power that made the council look weak by comparison. The question now was what that meant for the future. A group of representatives led by the Draxians immediately demanded restrictions on human military capability. They argued that no single species should have this much power. What would stop humans from using it to dominate the council? What prevented them from becoming the next Valorax? Jake Morrison stood to respond. He faced the accusations directly. Earth had disclosed its military capabilities when joining the council 20 years ago. The information was all there in the application documents. The council knew humanity came from a high-gravity world with a history of warfare. What they did not understand was what that actually meant in practice. Jake reminded them that humans did not seek this fight. They were asked for help. They gave it. 4 billion people on Telos 4 were alive because Earth kept its word. If the council wanted to punish humanity for saving lives, then perhaps the council needed to reconsider its values. A new voice joined the debate. Ambassador Corvin of Telos 4 stepped forward. His skin was pale green, his eyes large and expressive. He spoke with emotion barely controlled. His people had watched the Valorax fleet approach, knowing they would all die. Then human ships arrived. In 3 hours, the nightmare ended. His government officially thanked Earth and requested that human forces remain in their system until the sector was secured. Other representatives from worlds conquered by the Valorax added their voices. They wanted liberation. They wanted protection. They wanted human fleets to drive the Valorax back to their borders and free the occupied territories. The debate continued for hours. Some species saw humanity as saviors. Others saw potential tyrants. No one could agree on what should happen next. But one thing was clear. The galaxy had changed. Humanity was no longer the curious newcomer. They were a major power, and every species had to decide how to respond. Aboard the Valiant, Admiral Cross stood in his ready room reviewing reports. 12 wounded, none killed. By military standards, the battle was a complete success, but Cross took no joy in victory. He had been a soldier long enough to know that winning today meant more fighting tomorrow. Captain Chen entered with a message from Earth Command. The UN Security Council congratulated the Fifth Fleet. Additional forces were being mobilized. Earth was preparing for the possibility that the Velarax would retaliate, or that new threats would emerge. Cross discussed strategy with Chen. The Velarax Empire was vast. They had dozens of worlds and military forces hundreds of times larger than what they faced at Telos 4. This battle was just an opening move. If war continued, it would be long and bloody. Chen asked the question weighing on both of them. Had humanity just become the Council's military by default? Would every crisis now fall to human fleets? Cross admitted he did not know. Earth never wanted this role. They joined the Council to trade, learn, and explore, to be part of something peaceful, but someone had to stand against evil. If the peaceful species could not or would not, then perhaps it fell to those who could. On the Velarax homeworld, the High Command convened an emergency session. News from Telos 4 was catastrophic. An entire battle group destroyed. Commander Thrax's surrender message played on screens across the Empire. His shame broadcast for all to see. Warlord Craxus, supreme leader of the Velarax, watched footage of the battle with growing rage. Humans. He pulled up Imperial databases. The reports were minimal. A species from a death world, recently admitted to the Council, considered unremarkable. The reports were clearly wrong. Craxus faced a critical decision. He could mobilize the full military against humanity, but that risked escalating beyond what even the Velarax could sustain. Or he could accept defeat and consolidate what territory they already held. Pride demanded vengeance. Strategy suggested caution. His advisors were divided. Younger warlords wanted blood. They wanted to show the galaxy that the Velarax could not be defeated by one battle. Older commanders counseled patience. They needed to understand this enemy before committing to total war. Study them. Learn their weaknesses. Then strike. Craxus made his choice. He ordered reconnaissance missions. Study the humans. Learn everything about them. Understand how they fight. The Velarax had time. This war was not over. It was just beginning. Across the galaxy, news of the battle spread like wildfire. On peaceful council worlds, citizens debated in public forums and cafes. Universities held emergency symposiums. News networks interviewed human ambassadors and historians. Everyone wanted to understand what made humans different. Historians explained that the answer lay in Earth's unique history. Humanity evolved on a planet that actively tried to kill them. High gravity made them strong. Dangerous predators made them smart. Extreme weather made them adaptable. Survival required constant innovation and cooperation. When humans turned those survival skills on each other, the result was 10,000 years of warfare. But war also taught discipline. Military academies studied past battles. Soldiers trained relentlessly. Technology advanced at terrifying speed. By the time humans reached the stars, they had refined warfare to a science. Council species evolved under gentler conditions. Their worlds were peaceful. Predators were rare. Cooperation came naturally. Most abandoned warfare thousands of years ago, considering it primitive. They never needed to become good at fighting. Now the galaxy confronted an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes violence was necessary to protect civilization, and if you were not prepared for violence, you became a victim of it. On Earth, public reaction was mixed. Pride in their fleet's victory, certainly. Celebrations in major cities, but also concern. Many humans had joined the Council hoping to leave violence behind. Now their warriors were at the forefront again, fighting battles for alien species. Sophie Grant spoke at a press conference in Geneva. Global media attended, broadcasting to billions. She emphasized that Earth acted defensively. The Velarax were aggressors. Humanity intervened to save lives, not to dominate. The Fifth Fleet would stand down once threats were eliminated. A reporter asked the question everyone wondered. What if the Council turned on humanity? What if they feared Earth too much to allow them to remain? Sophie's answer was measured but firm. Earth valued Council membership. They believed in cooperation and mutual defense. But if forced to choose between being feared and being vulnerable, humanity would choose strength. They learned that lesson throughout history. Better to be the protector than the victim. Kalara visited Jake Morrison privately after the council session ended. They met in a quiet garden on Harmony Prime, away from cameras and other diplomats. She looked exhausted, her blue skin pale from stress. She confessed that she did not know what to think anymore. She had dedicated her life to peace and diplomacy. She believed violence was always avoidable if people just talked to each other. Then she watched 4 billion people saved by that very violence she opposed. Jake understood her confusion. He told her something his grandfather taught him when he was young. Peace was not the absence of violence. Peace was what you had when good people were strong enough to protect the innocent. Diplomacy worked when both sides wanted peace. But when one side wanted conquest, only force could stop them. Humanity would always choose to be strong, Jake explained. The question was whether the council would let them be good. Would they trust Earth to use power responsibly, or would fear drive them apart? Kalara left without answering directly, but the look in her eyes suggested she understood. The galaxy had changed fundamentally. There was no going back to the way things were. The council had spent thousands of years avoiding conflict. Now they had to face the reality that peace required strength. In the weeks following the battle, debates continued. The council slowly reached a consensus. They would not restrict human military power. Instead, they would build up their own defenses. Human advisors would train council forces. Joint exercises would become standard. The galaxy was learning what humanity knew all along. If you want peace, prepare for war. The Fifth Fleet remained on station near Telos 4. Additional human ships patrolled the frontier. Earth had become, by necessity and default, the Council's primary military power. Not because they sought dominance, but because no one else could do what needed to be done. Admiral Cross stood on the Valiant's observation deck, watching Telos 4 rotate slowly below. The planet looked peaceful from orbit, green and gold, beautiful and alive. 4 billion people down there owed their lives to his crew. That knowledge made the burden of command a little easier to bear. Captain Chen joined him at the window. She asked if he thought this would ever end. Would humanity always be the ones fighting? Would Earth ever find the peace they came to the stars seeking? Cross did not have an answer. He hoped so. He hoped that one day the Council would be strong enough to defend itself. That humanity could retire from. 3 months passed since the battle at Telos 4. The Valorax Empire withdrew to its original borders. The 14 occupied Council worlds were liberated. Human forces, supported by newly trained Council defense fleets, patrolled the frontier. An uneasy peace settled across the sector. The galaxy was forever changed. For the first time in thousands of years, the Galactic Council was building real warships. Not ceremonial vessels with decorative weapons. Actual combat ships designed to fight and win. Human engineers worked alongside Council designers, sharing knowledge accumulated over centuries of warfare. Human advisors trained Council officers in tactics and strategy. Jake Morrison coordinated defense planning from Harmony Prime, working with representatives from dozens of species. Joint military exercises became common. Species that had never fired a weapon in anger now practiced combat maneuvers. The Council was learning what humanity knew instinctively. If you want peace, prepare for war. Not everyone was happy with this new reality. A coalition of Council species, led by traditionalists, demanded restrictions on human military expansion. They proposed limits on fleet sizes and oversight committees to monitor human activities. Their argument was simple. No single species should have this much military dominance. Jake opposed these measures in heated debates. He argued that restrictions would only weaken the Council's ability to respond to future threats. The Valorax were contained, but other dangers existed. Pirates attacked shipping lanes. Rogue states threatened borders. Unknown hostiles might emerge from unexplored regions. Limiting human capability meant making the Council vulnerable again. Kalara surprised many by siding with Jake. She had spent 3 months visiting liberated worlds, speaking with survivors of Valorax occupation. She saw the mass graves, the destroyed cities, the broken families. She understood now that peace without strength was just an invitation for predators. The debates went on for weeks. Eventually, a compromise emerged. Human military forces would remain under Earth's command. Earth agreed to formal mutual defense treaties with the Council. If any member world was threatened, humanity would respond. In exchange, the Council would increase its own military capabilities and share the defense burden. It was not perfect, but it was workable. Humanity accepted the role of protector. The Council accepted that civilization sometimes needed warriors. Admiral Cross received orders to return to Earth. The UN wanted him to teach at the Naval Academy, training the next generation of officers. He was tempted. He was tired of war. He wanted to go home, see his family, rest. But Captain Chen reminded him that the galaxy still needed leaders like him. The Velorax were quiet now, but history showed that defeated empires rarely stayed defeated. Someone had to be ready when they returned. Someone had to maintain the guard. Cross agreed to stay for another year. One more tour. Then younger officers could take over. For now, the Fifth Fleet remained on station, guardians of the peace they fought to secure. On Earth, military academy enrollment surged. Young people who grew up believing humanity had moved beyond war now saw the value of service. They wanted to be like the crew of the Valiant. They wanted to protect others. They wanted to make a difference. Sophie Grant returned to Earth to teach at the UN Space Command Training Center. Her job was preparing the next generation for the realities of interstellar conflict. Not glory, not adventure, responsibility. The weight of making decisions that saved or cost lives. Her first class included recruits from across Earth and exchange students from Council worlds. A young Thessian cadet sat in the front row, eager to learn. Sophie looked at her and saw hope. Maybe humanity's greatest contribution was not just military power, but teaching others how to use power responsibly. Jake and Calera met for tea at a cafe on Harmony Prime. They had become friends over these months, bonded by shared experience and mutual respect. The cafe overlooked the station's central garden, a peaceful place where representatives from countless species mingled freely. Calera asked Jake what he thought humanity's place would be 50 years from now. Would they still be warriors? Or would they finally find the peace they seemed to crave? Jake considered the question carefully. He told her that humanity would always carry the capacity for violence. Evolution and history had made them that way. But capacity was not destiny. Humans could choose to be more than warriors. They could be builders, explorers, teachers, friends. The key, Jake explained, was ensuring that when humanity did fight, they fought for the right reasons. To protect, not conquer. To defend, not dominate. That was the promise Earth made when joining the Council. It was a promise they intended to keep. Calera smiled. She told him she finally understood something he said months ago. Humanity was not dangerous because they knew how to fight. They were dangerous because they knew when to fight. That made all the difference. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent message. Jake's communicator buzzed. Sophie's face appeared on the small screen, her expression serious. They had received a transmission from deep space. Origin unknown. Content disturbing. Jake and Calera rushed to the Council Security Center. Other representatives were already gathering. The room fell silent as the transmission played. The message was audio only, no video. The voice spoke in an ancient language that predated the Council itself. Translators struggled to interpret, but the meaning became clear. Other empires existed beyond explored space. Larger than the Velorax, more dangerous, more aggressive. These empires had observed the Council for centuries, waiting for the right moment to strike. They believed the Council was weak, unable to defend itself, easy prey for expansion. Then they saw what happened at Talos 4. They saw humanity. The message concluded with a warning and a promise. These unknown empires would not attack, not yet, because the Council now had something it never had before. Deathworlders willing to fight for them, predators who protected instead of hunted. But if the day came when humanity was no longer there, when the Council was vulnerable again, they would return, and they would show no mercy. The room remained silent after the transmission ended. Representatives looked at each other with fear and uncertainty. The threat was real. Unknown empires lurked in the darkness, watching, waiting. Jake stood with Admiral Cross and Sophie beside him. The three humans looked at each other, understanding passing between them without words. They knew what this meant. Humanity's burden was permanent now. They were the shield protecting the galaxy, whether they wanted that role or not. Cross broke the silence with typical military pragmatism. Humanity had been carrying burdens since the first person picked up a stick to defend their family. This was just a bigger stick in a larger family. They would manage. They always had. Sophie added that at least humanity was not alone anymore. The Council was learning. Other species were building defenses, training soldiers, preparing for threats. In time, maybe the burden would be shared more evenly. Jake nodded slowly. He looked out at the stars visible through the observation windows. He thought about Earth, about the journey humanity took from caves to starships. They came to the galaxy looking for friends. They found a civilization that needed protectors. It was not what they expected, but perhaps it was what they were always meant to be. The Fifth Fleet remained on station. Across human space, shipyards built new vessels. Training intensified. Military academies expanded. Humanity prepared for the next threat, whatever form it took, because that was what Deathworlders did. They stood watch while others slept. They fought so others did not have to. They carried burdens too heavy for those who evolved under gentler suns. The council species were learning this now, learning that civilization required guardians, that peace needed protectors, that sometimes the most peaceful outcome required the threat of overwhelming violence. Kalara stood beside Jake at the window, both of them staring into the void. She asked him if he was afraid. Afraid of what might come, afraid of the unknown empires lurking in the darkness. Jake's answer was honest. Yes, he was afraid. Fear was natural. Fear kept you alert, kept you careful. But fear did not stop you from doing what needed to be done. Humanity had faced extinction countless times throughout history. Ice ages, plagues, wars, every time they survived because they refused to give up. They adapted. They fought. They endured. Now the stakes were larger. They were not just protecting Earth. They were protecting the entire Galactic Council. Thousands of species, trillions of lives. The responsibility was immense, but humanity would not fail. They could not fail, because if they did, civilizations would fall. Admiral Cross transmitted new orders to the fleet. Increase patrols. Improve sensor networks. Prepare for long-term deployment. The easy part was over. Now came the hard part. Waiting. Watching. Being ready. On Telos 4, citizens looked up at the night sky and saw human ships passing overhead. Those ships represented safety, protection, hope. Children asked their parents about the humans who saved them. Stories were told. Legends began to form. Across the council, similar stories spread. Humanity became the subject of fascination. Some species feared them. Others admired them. All respected them. And in the darkness beyond explored space, unknown empires watched and waited. They had seen what humanity could do. They had witnessed the fall of the Velarax. They would not make. 1 year after the Battle of Telos 4, the galaxy had settled into a new normal. The Galactic Council was stronger than it had been in centuries. Member worlds built defense fleets. Training academies opened on dozens of planets. Species that once knew only peace now understood the necessity of strength. But the shadow of the unknown message hung over everything. Those mysterious empires lurking beyond explored space, watching, waiting, planning. Council intelligence services searched for any trace of them. Exploration ships pushed deeper into uncharted territory. Every species wanted to know what threats lay ahead. Admiral Cross stood on the bridge of the Valiant, now stationed permanently at Harmony Prime. The carrier served as the flagship for the Joint Council Defense Initiative. Human officers worked alongside Council personnel, sharing knowledge and building trust. Cross had aged visibly in the past year. More gray in his hair, deeper lines in his face. Command in peacetime was different from command in war, but the burden remained heavy. Every decision still carried consequences. Every order still affected lives. Captain Chen entered with daily reports. Council fleets were performing well in exercises. Response times had improved. Coordination between species was getting smoother. The military buildup was progressing ahead of schedule. But Chen also brought troubling news. Velarax ships had been spotted near the border. Not military vessels. Reconnaissance drones. They were watching, gathering intelligence. The Velarax had not given up. They were learning, adapting, preparing. Cross was not surprised. Defeated empires always wanted revenge. The question was when they would strike, and whether the Council would be ready. On Earth, society had adapted to its new role. Humans were no longer just members of the Galactic Council. They were its defenders. Military service became honorable again, not something shameful from the past. Young people enlisted with pride, knowing they protected trillions of lives. But not everyone was happy. Peace activists protested outside UN headquarters. They argued that Earth was becoming too militarized, that humanity was losing its peaceful ideals. They wanted Earth to step back, to let other species defend themselves. Jake Morrison returned to Earth briefly to address these concerns. He spoke at the UN General Assembly, his words broadcast globally. He understood the protesters' fears. He shared them. No one wanted Earth to become a military state, but Jake reminded everyone why humanity joined the Council in the first place. To be part of something larger, to have allies, to protect and be protected. That promise worked both ways. If Earth refused to defend Council members, the alliance meant nothing. He told them about Telos 4, about 4 billion people who would be dead if humanity had stayed neutral, about the liberated worlds where children now grew up free because human soldiers fought for them, about the future where maybe, someday, the burden would be shared and humanity could rest. But that day had not come yet. Until it did, Earth would stand guard. Sophie Grant's training program had expanded beyond expectations. Hundreds of council officers rotated through her courses, learning human military doctrine. Some adapted easily. Others struggled with concepts foreign to their peaceful cultures. But all of them tried. One afternoon, Sophie received a visitor. Commander Thrak, the Velarax officer captured at Telos 4. He had been released months ago as part of the peace agreement. Now he stood in her office, nervous but determined. Thrak asked if he could attend her classes. He wanted to understand how humans fought, not to use against them, but to learn from them. The Velarax Empire was changing. Younger officers questioned the old ways. They saw that aggression without strategy led to defeat. Sophie was surprised but agreed. Thrak became her most dedicated student. He studied every lesson, asked thoughtful questions, and slowly began to understand. War was not about brutality. It was about discipline, planning, and knowing when to fight and when to negotiate. Kalara had become one of the Council's strongest advocates for military preparedness. She traveled constantly, speaking to planetary governments and citizen groups. Her message was simple. Peace was precious, but it required protection. The Council could no longer rely solely on diplomacy. She met Jake at their usual cafe on Harmony Prime. They sat in comfortable silence, watching ships come and go through the station windows. Their friendship had deepened over the year. Mutual respect had become genuine affection. Kalara finally spoke. She thanked Jake for what humanity had done, not just fighting the Velarax but teaching the Council to be strong. She admitted that a year ago she would have opposed everything Earth represented. Now she understood that strength and morality were not opposites. You needed both, Jake smiled. He told her that humanity had learned just as much from the Council. How to cooperate across cultural boundaries, how to build consensus, how to pursue peace even while preparing for war. The galaxy was better because both approaches existed. Their conversation was interrupted by alarms. Red lights flashed throughout the station. Emergency channels activated. Something was happening at the frontier. They rushed to the command center. Displays showed multiple contacts entering Council space. Unknown ships. Large ones. Moving with purpose toward inhabited systems. Admiral Cross was already coordinating the response. The Fifth Fleet was moving to intercept. Council defense fleets were mobilizing. This was what they had prepared for. But as more data came in, Cross's expression changed. These were not Velarax ships. The design was completely different. More advanced, more dangerous, and there were dozens of them. The mysterious empires had arrived. Jake watched the tactical display with growing concern. This was bigger than Telos 4. This was an invasion force. Multiple fleets targeting multiple worlds simultaneously. The Council's new military was about to face its first real test. Cross opened a channel to all Council forces. His voice was calm despite the crisis. He reminded them that they had trained for this. Every exercise, every drill, every simulation was preparation for exactly this moment. They were ready. Human fleets moved to defensive positions. Council forces followed, taking up formations they had practiced hundreds of times. Different species working together. Unified command structure. Coordinated tactics. Everything humanity had taught them. The unknown ships broadcast a message. Their language was strange, but translators worked quickly. The message was simple and brutal. Surrender or be destroyed. The Council had 1 hour to respond. The council emergency session convened immediately. Representatives debated frantically. Some wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to fight. Fear and uncertainty filled the chamber. Jake stood and waited for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried across the chamber. He reminded them that the council had faced this choice before. When the Velarax threatened Telos IV, they could have surrendered. Instead, they fought. And they won. The council was stronger now. They had weapons, training. Most importantly, they had unity. Human forces would fight alongside council forces. Together, they would show these invaders that the galaxy was no longer weak. Kalara stood beside Jake. She seconded his position. The time for pure diplomacy was over. These invaders came with threats, not negotiations. The only answer they would understand was strength. The vote was called. By overwhelming majority, the council chose to fight. Admiral Cross received the authorization. He transmitted the council's response to the invading fleet. One word: no. The unknown ships did not expect that answer. They had observed the council for centuries, saw only peaceful species. They assumed fear would lead to surrender. They were wrong. The battle began. But this time it was different from Telos IV. This time humanity did not fight alone. Council ships fought beside human vessels. Different species using tactics they learned together. Supporting each other. Covering weaknesses. Amplifying strengths. The invaders were strong. Their weapons were powerful. But they faced something they had not anticipated. A unified defense. Species working together with human coordination and council determination. The battle raged for hours. Ships on both sides took damage. Lives were lost. But the council line held. Every time the invaders pushed, the defense pushed back. Human experience combined with council courage created something neither could achieve alone. Finally, the invading fleet withdrew. They had expected easy prey. They found warriors instead. The message was clear. The Galactic Council was no longer vulnerable. They had learned to fight. They had Deathworlders as allies, and they would defend themselves. In the aftermath, the council chamber erupted in celebration. Representatives embraced each other. Species that had never shown physical affection before shared relief and joy. They had won. Together. Jake stood with Kalara, watching the celebration. She asked him if he thought the threats would ever end. Would the galaxy ever truly know peace? Jake's answer was thoughtful. Maybe not complete peace. The universe was too large, too full of different species with different goals. But they could have something better. A civilization strong enough to defend itself. Diverse enough to solve any problem. United enough to face any threat. Humanity had given the Council something precious. Not just military power, but the understanding that peaceful civilizations could also be strong. That cooperation and defense were not opposites. That you could build a society based on peace while being prepared for war.